The champagne glass slipped from my fingers. Crystal shattered against marble as my daughter's voice echoed through the ballroom. Who wants my useless mom for $1? Laughter rippled through the crowd of Seattle's elite. Designer gowns rustled. Diamond earrings caught the chandelier light. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped steel cables around my ribs. I'm Cordelia Blackwood, 73 years old, widow, standing on an auction stage like a piece of unwanted furniture. Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. The charity auction had been Serafina's idea. My daughter stood at the front of the ballroom, her red silk dress catching the light. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Come on, people, she called out, her voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. Someone must want to spend time with my dear mother. She's got plenty of stories about the good old days. More laughter, cruel, sharp. It cut through me like a blade. The auctioneer's hammer gleamed under the lights. We have Mrs. Blackwood here for a lovely afternoon of companionship. Starting bid is $1. His voice boomed across the silent ballroom. Silence stretched like taffy. My face burned. The silk dress I'd bought specially for tonight suddenly felt like sandpaper against my skin. I caught fragments of whispered conversation. Poor thing. How embarrassing. Serafina's always been dramatic. The words buzzed around me like angry wasps. My hands trembled. I wanted to run, disappear into the Seattle rain and never come back. But my legs felt like concrete pillars, heavy, immovable. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but women I'd never met but had heard about for years, the ones who lunched at exclusive clubs and vacationed in the Hamptons, the ones who made my daughter ashamed of her humble beginnings. They tittered behind their champagne flutes, their eyes avoiding mine. Going once for $1, the auctioneer announced. His voice echoed off the marble walls. The ballroom fell silent except for the soft clink of ice and glasses. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the final humiliation. No one wanted to spend time with the useless old woman, not even for $1. Serafina's friends whispered among themselves. Their designer jewelry sparkled under the chandeliers. Their perfect makeup couldn't hide the cruelty in their eyes. They were enjoying this, watching me squirm. Watching my daughter destroy me in front of everyone who mattered in her world. The auction timer ticked down, 30 seconds, 20, 10. My throat closed up. Tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Going twice for $1. The auctioneer's voice carried a note of pity now. Even he felt sorry for me. The old woman nobody wanted. The burden her successful daughter was trying to unload. Then a voice cut through the silence like a sword. $1 million. Every head in the room snapped toward the back corner. A man stood slowly, tall, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Someone dropped their purse. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The auctioneer's jaw dropped. I'm sorry, sir, did you say... His voice cracked on the words, his hands shook as he gripped the podium. $1 million, the man repeated, his voice carrying easily across the stunned ballroom. For an afternoon with Mrs. Blackwood. His words were clear, confident, final. Serafina's face went white as fresh snow. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The champagne flute in her hand shook so hard I thought it might shatter. Her perfect composure cracked like ice in spring. That's impossible, she stammered. Her voice was barely a whisper. Who are you? The question hung in the air like smoke. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for answers, but the man just smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made my heart skip a beat. Something about his eyes was familiar, warm, kind, like I'd seen them before in another lifetime. I'd raised this woman, changed her diapers, walked the floors with her when she had colic, sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for her college tuition when her father's business went under, worked double shifts at the diner to keep food on our table after he died, sacrificed everything I had and everything I was. And this was my reward. Public humiliation, being auctioned off like livestock at a county fair. The memories crashed over me like waves. Serafina at 5, crying because she'd scraped her knee. Me kissing it better, promising everything would be okay. Serafina at 16, embarrassed when I picked her up from school in my beat up Honda, the way she ducked down in the passenger seat so her friends wouldn't see me. Serafina at 25, graduating from law school. I'd been so proud. Took pictures with my old camera while she posed with her wealthy classmates. She'd barely looked at me that day, too busy networking with people who could advance her career. The signs had been there for years. The way she'd changed the subject when her friends asked about her family, the elaborate stories she'd create about our background, the shame in her eyes whenever I visited her downtown office. But I'd ignored it all, made excuses, told myself she was just ambitious, driven, that she'd come around eventually. That blood was thicker than water. I was wrong. Blood meant nothing to Serafina. I was just an embarrassment she couldn't wait to get rid of. The diner where I'd worked for 30 years had closed down last month, and the owner couldn't compete with the fancy coffee shops moving into the neighborhood. I'd lost my job, my purpose, my identity. Serafina had barely blinked when I told her. "You'll figure something out, Mom," she'd said, not looking up from her phone. "You always do." Like losing everything was just another minor inconvenience in her busy life. Now here I was, standing on a stage, being sold to the highest bidder, while my daughter laughed and her friends applauded her cruelty. The man in the tuxedo walked forward with measured steps. His shoes clicked against the marble floor. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Every eye followed his movement. He moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed, someone who commanded respect without demanding it. He stopped directly in front of Serafina, close enough that she had to crane her neck to look up at him. His presence filled the space around him, powerful, magnetic, dangerous. "My name is Maximilian Rothschild," he said quietly. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath the silk. "And 47 years ago, your mother saved my life." The man walked toward me. Each step echoed in the suddenly silent ballroom. When he reached me, he took my trembling hands in his. His touch was warm, gentle, real. "Cordelia," he said softly, "I've waited 47 years to say this properly." His eyes held mine, kind, grateful, familiar in a way that made my chest ache with recognition. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of someone dropping their purse. Serafina stumbled backward, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like fear. "That's impossible," she repeated, but her voice cracked on the words. "My mother never—" "She's nobody special. She worked in a diner." The words tumbled out of her mouth like stones, each one hitting me like a physical blow. Maximilian's eyes found mine across the room. They were kind, warm, familiar, in a way that made my chest ache with recognition. Something stirred in my memory. A young face. Blood. Rain. The smell of gasoline and smoke. "Your mother," he said, never breaking eye contact with me, "pulled me from a burning car when I was 19 years old. She was working the night shift at Murphy's Diner on Highway 101. Saw the accident happen right outside the window." My breath caught. The memory crashed over me like a tidal wave, rain pounding on the diner's windows. The screech of tires on wet asphalt, the explosion of metal and glass as two cars collided right in front of Murphy's. I'd been wiping down tables when it happened. The sound was like thunder, like the world splitting open. I'd dropped my rag and run outside without thinking, without hesitation, without fear. The first car was empty. The driver had crawled out and was stumbling around in shock, but the second car was on fire. Flames licked at the hood, smoke poured from the engine, and trapped inside was a young man, barely more than a boy, blood streaming down his face. "She didn't hesitate," Maximilian continued, his voice growing stronger. "Ran straight into the flames, pulled me out just before the gas tank exploded, stayed with me until the ambulance came, held my hand and told me everything would be okay." The crowd hung on every word. Serafina's face had gone from white to green. She gripped the auction podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her perfect world was crumbling around her like a house of cards. I remembered the weight of him, how young he'd looked, how scared. His hand gripping mine like a lifeline while we waited for help. The way he'd whispered, "Thank you," over and over until the paramedics took him away. "I'd tried to find her afterward," Maximilian said, "to thank her properly. But she'd given the paramedics a fake name. Disappeared like an angel." His voice carried across the silent ballroom. Every person hung on his words. I remembered why I'd lied. My husband had been drinking again that night. I'd had a black eye and split lip. Didn't want anyone asking questions. Didn't want the attention. Didn't want to explain why a diner waitress looked like she'd been hit by a truck. So I'd given them my maiden name, Cordelia Mason, instead of Cordelia Blackwood. Let them think I was someone else. Someone who didn't exist. Someone who couldn't be found. I've been looking for her ever since, Maximilian continued. Hired private investigators, searched hospital records, nothing. Until 3 weeks ago when I saw her picture in the society pages, standing next to her daughter at a gallery opening. Serafina's knees buckled. She grabbed onto her friend's arm for support. This is insane. You're making this up. But her voice was weak, desperate, the voice of someone who knew their world was about to end. Maximilian reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. The paper was old, fragile, carefully preserved. He unfolded it with reverent hands. Murphy's Diner, he read aloud. Waitress Cordelia Mason, 26, rescued an unidentified motorist from a burning vehicle early Tuesday morning. The victim was transported to Seattle General Hospital in stable condition. My maiden name. The diner where I'd worked before Serafina was born. Before I'd met her father and changed my name. Before my life had become about sacrifice and disappointment and broken dreams. The room spun. 47 years. He'd been searching for 47 years. For me. For the woman who'd pulled him from a burning car and then vanished into the night like smoke. The article got one thing wrong, Maximilian said, folding the clipping carefully. I wasn't unidentified. I was Maximilian Rothschild, heir to Rothschild Industries. And that night, Cordelia Mason saved the life of someone who would go on to build a $20 billion empire. Serafina made a sound like a wounded animal. Her face crumpled. The confident, cruel woman who'd humiliated me moments before had vanished. In her place stood a frightened child who'd just realized she'd made a terrible mistake. 20 billion? Someone whispered. The words rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Rothschild Industries owns half of downtown Seattle, another voice added. And she saved his life? The whispers grew louder, more urgent. I felt the crowd's attention shift. No longer was I the pathetic old woman being auctioned off for charity. I was the hero who'd saved a billionaire's life. The angel who'd appeared in his darkest moment and then disappeared without a trace. Maximilian walked toward me. Each step echoed in the suddenly silent ballroom. When he reached me, he took my trembling hands in his. His touch was warm, real, grounding. Cordelia, he said softly, I've waited 47 years to say this properly. Thank you. You gave me my life back that night. Everything I've accomplished since then exists because of your courage. Tears blurred my vision. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to women like me. I was nobody special, just a widow who'd worked hard and loved her daughter despite everything. I don't understand, I whispered. My voice was barely audible. The words felt foreign in my mouth. You will, he said. But first, I believe I owe the charity $1 million for the privilege of your company. He turned to the auctioneer, who still stood frozen behind his podium. I trust you accept wire transfers? The man nodded mutely. His face was pale. His hands shook as he gripped his gavel. Excellent. My assistant will handle the details. Maximilian looked back at Serafina, who had sunk into a nearby chair. Her face was buried in her hands, mascara streaked down her cheeks like black tears. As for you, young lady, he said, his voice cooling several degrees. We need to have a conversation about how you treat the woman who gave you life. Serafina looked up. Her makeup was ruined, her perfect hair disheveled. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a balloon with all the air let out. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. The words came out broken, desperate, but they felt hollow, empty, like everything else she'd said to me over the years. That's the problem, Maximilian replied. You never bothered to ask, never bothered to learn about your mother's life before you existed. You saw only what you wanted to see. He was right. Serafina had always been ashamed of our modest background, embarrassed by my working class roots. She'd spent years trying to erase where she came from, creating elaborate stories about our family history for her wealthy friends. Your mother, Maximilian continued, is one of the most remarkable women I've ever known, and you just tried to auction her off like a piece of unwanted furniture. The crowd murmured agreement. I saw heads nodding. Faces that had been laughing at me minutes before now looked at Serafina with disgust. The tables had turned completely. The hunter had become the hunted. I'm sorry, she whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. But the words felt hollow, empty, like everything else she'd said to me over the years. Too little, too late. Maximilian squeezed my hands gently. Cordelia, would you do me the honor of having dinner with me tomorrow night? I have so much I want to tell you. So much I want to share. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat was tight with emotion. 47 years of searching. 47 years of wondering what happened to the angel who'd saved his life. And here I was, standing in front of him, real, alive, found. Wonderful. I'll send a car at 7. He paused, glancing around the ballroom. And perhaps we can discuss some opportunities. I've been looking for someone to head up my new charitable foundation. Someone with real-world experience. Someone who understands what it means to help others without expecting anything in return. My heart stopped. You can't be serious. The words came out as a whisper, a prayer, a desperate hope that this wasn't all some cruel dream. I'm always serious about business, Cordelia, and saving lives is the most important business there is. His eyes were steady, honest, full of possibilities I'd never dared imagine. The implications hit me like lightning. A job, a real job, with someone who valued what I'd done, who saw worth in the woman Serafina had tried to throw away, who understood that sometimes the most important moments in life happen when nobody's watching. Around us, the charity auction continued, but I barely heard it. My mind was spinning with possibilities I'd never dared imagine. A new life, a new purpose, a chance to matter again. Serafina stood slowly. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her perfect makeup ruined. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a child who'd been caught doing something terrible and didn't know how to fix it. Mom, she said quietly, can we talk? Her voice was small, broken. Nothing like the confident woman who'd humiliated me moments before. I looked at my daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, the woman who'd just humiliated me in front of Seattle's elite, the person who'd made me feel worthless and forgotten, the daughter who'd tried to auction me off like unwanted furniture. Not tonight, I said finally. My voice was steady, strong. For the first time in years, I felt like I had power, like I mattered. Tonight, I have plans. Maximilian smiled. Indeed you do. We have 47 years to catch up on. He offered me his arm, strong, steady, reliable in a way I'd forgotten men could be. As we walked toward the exit, I felt the crowd's eyes following us. But this time, the attention didn't make me want to hide. This time, I held my head high, my spine straight, my shoulders back. I was no longer the pathetic old woman being sold for charity. I was Cordelia Blackwood, the woman who'd saved a billionaire's life, the hero who'd run into flames without hesitation. Behind us, Serafina called out one more time, Mom, please, I can explain. Her voice cracked on the words, desperate, pleading, but some explanations came too late. Some wounds cut too deep to heal with simple words. I didn't turn around, didn't look back, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me waver. She'd made her choice when she put me on that auction block, when she laughed at my humiliation, when she called me useless in front of everyone who mattered in her world. The Seattle rain had stopped. Stars peeked through the clouds as Maximilian's driver opened the door of a gleaming black Mercedes. The leather seats were soft, warm, expensive, everything I'd never had but somehow deserved. This is just the beginning, Cordelia, Maximilian said as I settled into the car. His voice was gentle. kind, full of promise. Tomorrow, your real life starts. The engine purred to life, smooth, quiet, powerful, like everything else in Maximilian's world. Through the tinted windows, I watched the charity auction fade into the distance. The ballroom where my daughter had tried to destroy me, the stage where I'd stood like a piece of unwanted merchandise. But I wasn't unwanted anymore. I wasn't useless. I wasn't the burden Serafina had made me feel like for so many years. I was valuable, important, worth $1 million to the man sitting beside me. Tell me about the foundation, I said. My voice was stronger now, more confident. The voice of a woman who'd found her purpose again. Maximilian's eyes lit up. It's everything I've dreamed of building. A place where people like you can make a real difference. Where kindness matters more than connections. Where courage is valued over cash. The city lights blurred past the windows. Seattle looked different from inside a Mercedes. Cleaner. Brighter. Full of possibilities I'd never noticed before. Maybe because I'd never had reason to look up from the ground. I want to help people who've been forgotten, Maximilian continued. The ones society throws away. The elderly, the poor, the invisible. People like you were tonight before I stood up. My chest tightened, not with pain this time, but with something else. Hope. Purpose. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything I'd been through had led to this moment. This chance. This new beginning. Why me? I asked. You could hire anyone. Someone with experience. Education. Credentials. Maximilian turned to face me. His eyes were serious, intense. Because you've lived it, Cordelia. You know what it feels like to be discarded, undervalued, treated like you don't matter. That's not something you can learn in business school. The car pulled up to my apartment building. Small, modest, nothing like the mansions in Serafina's neighborhood, but it was mine. Paid for with my own sweat and sacrifice, honest work and honest money. 7 o'clock tomorrow, Maximilian said as his driver opened my door. We'll discuss the details then, but, Cordelia? He caught my hand as I stepped out. Thank you for saving my life. For being the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The world needs more people like you. I watched the Mercedes disappear into the night, its taillights fading like red stars. Then I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Each step felt lighter than the last, like I was walking on air instead of concrete. Inside, I kicked off my heels. Hung up the silk dress I'd bought for the auction, the dress I'd worn to my own humiliation, but also to my salvation, to the moment when everything changed. My phone buzzed, a text from Serafina. Mom, please call me. I can explain everything. I love you. I deleted it without reading it twice. Love wasn't a word you threw around after trying to auction someone off for charity. Love wasn't laughing while your mother stood on a stage like livestock. Love wasn't calling the woman who raised you useless in front of a room full of strangers. Love was running into a burning car to save a stranger. Love was working double shifts to pay for your child's education. Love was sacrificing everything and asking for nothing in return. Serafina didn't know what love was, but maybe, someday, she'd learn. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap stuff from the corner store, but tonight it tasted like champagne, like victory, like the beginning of something beautiful. Tomorrow, I would meet with Maximilian Rothschild. Tomorrow, I would start a new job, a new life, a new chapter in a story I'd thought was already over. But tonight, I would sit in my small apartment and remember what it felt like to matter, to be valued, to be seen as more than just a burden or an embarrassment. Tonight, I would remember that sometimes the universe keeps score, that kindness comes back to you in ways you never expect, that 47 years isn't too long to wait for justice, and somewhere across the city, in her expensive penthouse, my daughter was learning that actions have consequences, that cruelty has a price, that the mother she'd tried to throw away was worth more than she'd ever imagined. The rain started again, soft drops against my window, but I wasn't sad anymore. Rain meant growth, change, new beginnings. And tomorrow when the sun came up, Cordelia Blackwood would rise with it. Not as the useless old woman her daughter had tried to auction off, but as the hero who'd saved a billionaire's life. The angel who'd appeared in someone's darkest moment and changed everything. The woman who'd finally found her worth. If you've ever been treated like you're invisible, called worthless, or had to fight for what's yours, you still have power. Your value isn't determined by how others see you, but by the courage you show when it matters most. To anyone who's been counted out, you're not finished, you're just getting started. Your story isn't over yet. Sometimes the universe is just taking its time to balance the scales. What lesson hit you hardest from Cordelia's story? And if you were in her shoes, what would you have done when your own daughter put you on that auction block? Don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen right now and watch another story from our channel. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.